welcome to another PES, Power and Energy Society event. We have a fantastic evening today, and before we start, I would like to thank University of Manchester for organizing this, and thank Lewis and his team for organizing and coordinating, ensuring that that all is in place. So, getting to this event. This particular event was brought to you by our chapter, which is Power and Energy Society chapter. It was also brought by the Industrial Application Society and also by Society on Social Implications of Technology. Okay, and also I would like to take a couple of minutes just to give you an introduction of the speaker today, speaker of the event. So DavidVaglia has his roots in energy industry. He began his career in coal mining industry, working as an applications engineer in power distribution and electric rail haulage systems. These are mining train systems, both above and below ground. He has also worked in the renewable energy sector, investigating new concept energy generation applications and solar thermal systems. David transitioned to instrumentation and control, working with SCADA systems, and then to man-machine interface design of nuclear power control rooms. David is presently a principal engineer in the control room design group of operating power plants business at Westinghouse Electric Company. In Westinghouse, he has held positions in management, marketing, and engineering. His educational background includes a Bachelor's of Science in Electrical Engineering, Bachelor's of Arts in General Arts and Science, both from Pennsylvania State University. He also has an MBA, which is Master of Business Administration from University of Pittsburgh, and is a registered professional engineer, which is equivalent to a chartered engineer in the UK. And he's a professional engineer in the state of Pennsylvania. And David has been an active member of IEEE for over 40 years. He's a senior member serving the Pittsburgh section, which is Region 2, in various capacities. David's volunteer positions have included Section Awards Chair, Treasurer, and Section Chair. In the Industrial Application Society and PES, or Pittsburgh Joint Chapter, is served as a Secretary, Treasurer, and Chair. He has also served as a General Chair of the 2008 PES Annual Meeting, which is one of the large meeting. And David was nominated and appointed as the Industrial Application Society's Distinguished Lecturer for 2015 and 2016. He's presently the Chair of the Joint Chapters of IAS and PES Pittsburgh section, which has won numerous IAS and PES chapter awards. The most recent award was 2016 IEEE IAS Most Happening Chapter. So without further ado, I give the floor to David.
Thank you very much, Chandra. I really appreciate being invited over here to the UK to give some talks. A lot of universities, some places, the National Grid organization coming this week. So I have a little bit different background than a lot of people. Not so much academia, more industry. And the thing about industry that I liked was when I first got out, I went to work in the mining industry, but it was not only power that I was involved in. I had the communication systems to worry about, I had the power systems to worry about, I had monitoring systems to worry about, had fan motors, we had preparation plants where we had control systems, process control systems. So whenever you came out of school, they thought, well, he's an electrical engineer, he knows everything. And you're given to an industry, when you go out to industry, at least a lot of the industry I've worked in, it's not the cutting edge technology. It's technology that existed 20, 30, 40, even 50 years ago. When I first got out, there was a haulage underground train system basically that used 600 volt DC, and the voltage disappeared. Circuit breaker kicked on the surface. They told me to go back and reset it. So I went up, found the building, opened the doors, and there was something I'd never seen before, a rotary converter. There wasn't solid state diodes or anything like that there, but a machine that actually had AC windings and DC windings. But I could talk about that forever. Let me talk about what I came here for. Let's see, get things up here. And I've been told I should talk into the microphone, so I won't be walking around the room too much. Oh, you know what it is? I have to find my cursor. I'll be okay as soon as I find my cursor. It's on the other screen, probably. Now, here we go. Oh, better?
Yep.
Okay. So I'm here to talk a little bit about electrical energy generation. Now, I'm not quite sure who's on my audience and whether I have a lot of senior people, a lot of academics. So if some of this is too young or too elementary, now please let me know. But this is our planet here. And I think that our challenge now is to keep the planet green, trying to put together sustainable products, energy generated from sustainable sources. Taking a look at the globe there, the one thing that I notice is this big ice ball down here. Our problem's the power right now. I think, as we progress and take care of the problem, there's going to be other problems, probably fresh water. Antarctica contains 60% of the world's fresh water locked up in ice. We're going to be mining Antarctica for fresh water in the future, I'm sure of that. So, okay, a little bit safety briefs. Chandra, pretty much did that. There's bathrooms outside. Around the hall. If we have to, we take the stairwell. We don't use the elevators for fire escapes. But something that I took notice of was most of the coal mines in the UK now are shut down. They used to operate. 50 years ago, there was a lot of coal mines. 50 years ago in Manchester collieries, there were 15,000 people employed in the coal mines right in this area. The picture here shows a mining machine. Has anybody seen one of those before? That's a longwall mining machine. The operator basically has to stand behind support racks, and there's a big conveyor underneath him there, underneath where his hands are, that the coal drops onto. Then there's flights or big chains that drag the coal away, put it on the conveyor belt. This is an advanced model compared to what I used whenever I was underground. Not that I ever controlled it, but this came from a museum, so it kind of tells you I'm a little bit old. I've been with the IEEE for 43 years now. If there's a map there of the British coal fields showing that actually we were in the coal fields at one point in time. We can become very complacent. Whenever I was working underground, I was very cautious. There were big machines operated by humans that they were out drinking the night before. You never knew. One false turn of the wheel and you could be pinned up against the ribs, which was a block of coal. There were 600 volt DC trolley systems that were unguarded, basically 600 volt DC open. If you touched it, you were gone. High voltage 7200 volt, 13,000 volt cables underground. All kinds of things that were hazardous to your health. Now, where I work, the biggest hazard is people walking down the stairwell with their cell phones trying to, text people. There's more injuries that way than there seem to be in the coal industries. But I came to the UK. I was one step away from death one time in Hong Kong. Whenever you cross streets, you always look the direction the cars are oncoming traffic, which in the United States is looking to the left. So automatically, look to the left and step out into the street. No cars coming. Well, a guy pulled me back right before a bus came the other way in Hong Kong. Took me out almost. So just be careful. Don't take things for granted. Whenever you go to a hotel, look for the escape before you go into the room. Know your surroundings. Okay, a little bit of an overview here, talk about fundamentals, how electricity is generated, sources of energy, renewable, non-renewables. Okay, energy, electrical energy, where does it come from? First law of thermodynamics says you don't get something from nothing. Basically, there's a conservation of energy law. Energy is neither created nor destroyed, it can only be transformed from one state to another. So generating electricity requires some other type of energy, some type of conversion. And the more efficiently we can make that conversion, the better off we are, the less energy we waste in the process. Okay, coal, gas, oil, they're all fossil fuels. They have the same thing in common. You have to burn them. You convert chemical energy into the thermal energy. Once you have the thermal energy, you have to boil water, creating steam. That's kinetic energy under movement. You pass the steam into a turbine. Turbine, of course, the steam expands in a turbine, causing the turbine to spin. So you have rotational energy there. Finally, you have the turbine connected to a generator, which converts the rotational energy to electrical. So basically, that's a common way of generating the electricity from other forms of energy. Nuclear is very similar to that in a sense that it has a mechanism to heat water. It's not chemical, it's nuclear though. But you have the thermal energy, the hot fuel, creating the steam, which then goes to the turbine for rotational energy, and then to the generator for electrical. So pretty much the same thing. Solar thermal is the same process. Bioenergy is pretty much the same process where you're burning, whether it be chicken waste or cow waste or grass or whatever, or even garbage people use. It's the same idea there. Hydro is different in a sense. You're taking potential energy, water raised up above a point that can be lowered because of the pressure drop, the head on the water is called. So you convert the potential energy to kinetic energy when the water is flowing, flows through the turbine at the bottom of the dam, rotational energy, and then the turbine is connected to the generator, generating the electricity. Solar photovoltaic, that's the one that's very different. You're converting direct sunlight to photovoltaic, using photovoltaics to electrical energy. So these are all the general sources of energy that we use to generate electricity. And the ones that are sustainable are the ones that I'm concerned about. Our standard of living has been based pretty much on 200 years of burning fossil fuels. And the question is, our living is based upon the amount of energy we use. The more we use, the higher our standard of living generally has been the economic formula. And this is a problem because it's not sustainable. Our lifestyles really weren't sustainable down into the future. Whenever I first started college back in the 70s, we went through what was called an Arab oil embargo. And that was the first wake-up call where we had a problem, where we had lines for gas stations to fill up your cars. You had to go every other day. If you had an even license plate number, you went on the even days. Odd license plate numbers, you went on odd days. Arab oil embargo passed, we forgot all about energy being a problem. We continued on our separate ways, our old ways. So right now, what are the options available for underdeveloped countries? I think our goal here is, we're mostly a lot of students here and professors, is to come up with the means to generate power using sustainable resources. Somehow convert what we have that is renewable into the power that the third world needs. And hopefully pass this down to the third world without having to create a financial gain that separates us from them further even. We want to give something good, something that they can be doing themselves, being employed gainfully, improving their own standard of living without creating a bigger differential between what we have and what they have. So electrical, how's it generated? Basically it's a rotating magnet in the generator turned by the steam in the turbine. Now what's interesting here is that this process is a very inefficient process. Whenever you generate steam by boiling water, converting it to kinetic energy, and then turning the turbine, you have about a 40% efficiency, maybe 42, 43% benefit at most. So 60% of the energy that goes into this conversion of coal, gas, oil, whatever, to make the steam, even nuclear, gets dumped back to the environment without being used. Once we get through the generation process, we have a distribution system. Power losses in a distribution system can vary anywhere from usually between 6% and 15%. 6%, you know, if you're a high-end user, a large facility, manufacturing facility, something like car manufacturing, steel making, where you have a lot of energy use, you buy the power at a higher voltage. There's less interface between you and the power company. You sit out at the end of the line there where your house sits, you're going to have a much higher loss of power. I go through my neighborhood now, and I know I have like a house that's got like 2 air conditioning units on it, and it's got a hot tub out back. And I look at the little power lines that power my house, and I think, my house was built in 1922. Those power lines were put in 1922. There's no way that that's going to sustain us for very long. And it wasn't too long after we bought the house, the pull out and the transformer blew up, and to put a new transformer in. But at any rate, of course, the power loss in the distribution system is proportional to the square of the current. Power loss is equal to I squared R. So whenever you raise the voltage up, you decrease the power loss. You increase the voltage twice, you decrease the power loss by a factor of 4. So that's why we have the high voltage systems. Probably everybody knows that, so I won't delay in that. Okay, here's an interesting statistic. Most people think coal is done. Whenever I was working in the coal mines, everyone was telling me coal was king. Union had a lot of power. Even in the UK here, Margaret Thatcher was doing battle with the coal rigs. I'm not sure who won. But at any rate, in the world in general, major electrical power sources still come from coal, nearly 50% of it. Fossil fuels in general, 72% of the world's electrical power generation. 19% from nuclear for the world, that's pretty good. That's about what it is in our country, the United States. On the UK side there, it shows the power is generated mostly by natural gas. A little bit of oil. I think gas is real close to 50% here in the UK. Where's your gas come from? Anybody know?
Norway.
Very good.
Yes.
Okay, most of it's Norway. Where did it used to come from?
See?
Russia?
No.
I think gas used to come from Russia, from what I understood. No? No?
Okay.
So. UK. Okay. How about the coal? They actually still buy some coal from the United States, which is amazing. When I worked underground, we used to sell coal locally. It wasn't very far that it would be transported. But here, Australia sells coal, the United States sells coal, and I think most of the mines are closed within the UK now. So, at any rate, 15% for nuclear in the UK also, which is interesting. And we'll talk a little bit about that in the next presentation even. So probably the smallest thing here is hydroelectric, 6.5% for those that have it. Norway has a lot of hydroelectric. I think there's not very much in the UK. I know there's a pump storage facility nearby because I was passing it when I was going down the wells. But biomass, but the worst part about this slide is very little of it is renewable, 9% from renewables. That's where we're sitting right now. Thermal plants, coal, gas, nuclear, solar thermal, geothermal, biomass, they all have the same process. They use something to generate heat. It creates the steam by boiling water, passes through the turbine, turns the generator, recondenses back into water. Called the Rankine cycle, and in the thermodynamics, it's about 40% efficient at best. The nuclear units that we have they operate at a lower temperature. They usually operate about 650 degrees Fahrenheit. So they don't have the high quality steam that you get from like a coal-fired plant. Coal-fired plant can be like 38, 39%. Nuclear plants are in general about 33, 32% efficient. Turbines are bigger because it's a lower quality steam. So everything's bigger in a nuclear plant. But you have a lot of heat. You're not so much worried about the efficiency there, although efficiency always counts. But you can take the lower efficiency because you're not generating the waste products that you are when you have the fossil fuel plants. U.S. most power plants are built away from the cities, so the heat is just kind of dumped to the environment. In Russia, USSR, a lot of plants were actually built next to towns, so the waste energy, or the 60% energy that's dumped into the environment normally, could be used to space heating in the office buildings and in the apartment buildings in Russia. That was fine until they had the Chernobyl problem. So, okay, so challenges that we face here again. No single energy source is perfect. They all have drawbacks. Countries usually use what they have available. U.S., we have a lot of coal. Coal is king for the U.S. We have a lot of natural gas. We're using gas. We have significant nuclear, close to 20% nuclear in the U.S. But at any rate, as I stated before there, the more fossil fuels we use now, the more unsustainable the system becomes, the more problems we have with the environment. So the nations that have plenty need to help the nations that do not have the technologies. We should use the technology to help better our world. So what's interesting here is I know China is building a lot of nuclear plants. I think they have something like 25 or so under construction. And whenever they're done with all these plants that they have under construction right now, they're predicting that by that point in time, the generation for nuclear capacity will be only about 6% of the energy used in China. So that's like 75% or so is coming from coal. They have a lot of coal, they have a lot of people they have to take care of, so that's what they're using right now. Okay, the pros with coal is, of course, the availability. There's like 8 billion tons of coal used every year. I was looking for an analogy. I know, like, we pump and burn about a cubic mile of petroleum every year around the world. I was trying to find what 11 billion tons of coal looked like, and I crapped out. I didn't get it to it quick enough. So, the coal provides roughly 30% of the global energy needs. It's over 40% of the world's electricity. It's used in the production of over 70% of the world's steel. So it's a valuable resource, something that we use, but it's slowly being moved out of center spot for electricity generation and being taken over by gas, mainly, at least in our country, the United States. Just some pictures there of the coal mining machines. They've become very large. They're mining, the machine there on top is actually mining a lignite grade of coal. It's lower BTU value than bituminous, but it also comes in 70-foot coal seams as opposed to 6-foot. So they can take a lot of coal out of the ground, even though it's lower quality, and use it to manufacture power. Generate power, I should say. The bad side of coal is it's mostly carbon, so it produces a lot of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere when it's burned. It comes with a lot of impurities, a lot of sulfur and nitrogen oxides, which whenever they're pumped together, can produce hydrogen, basically hydrochloric acid. No, sulfuric acid, I'm sorry. Coal ash contains mercury, arsenic, cadmium, and there's a lot of coal ash dumps within the United States. And what's happened in the past is a lot of times regulations that are produced now do not go back and force cleanup of existing sites. So there's a lot of sites in the United States where there's a lot of coal ash dump, just kind of like unstable, and if it rains a lot, can cause problems. And down in Tennessee, they had a very large washout during one of the hurricanes that came through there, where it released a lot of toxic and radioactive materials, over 300 acres worth, spread out down through the valleys of Tennessee. So there's always good with bad. What's interesting also, whenever I flew into the UK, I landed in Manchester, and it was a Sunday, this past Sunday, and it was a bright, beautiful morning, crystal clear in Manchester. And then I started driving down to Wales, to Wrexham, I believe it was called. And I passed power lines along the way, very high voltage power lines. It looked like it was more than 250, maybe 500 kilovolts. And pretty soon I saw haze in the air. And sooner or later, the power plants appeared off in the horizon. They were coal-fired plants down by Wales. Okay, there's also something called spontaneous combustion of coal. Whenever I was a young kid, they used to put what was called red dog on the roads, which was this red-looking material. And where it came from was the coal dumps. Whenever they would mine coal back in the day, they didn't do a good job of cleaning the fines. They would take the big chunks of coal and put them on trucks and send them to the power plants, but all the fines was hard to separate out from the rock. And if you sent that to the power plant would reject it. It would have too much ash in it. So they just sent all the fine coal mixed in with the fine rocks out to the coal pile. And with all that material there, it would start to spontaneous combust, and it would catch fire, sit there and smoke and smell terrible. And it would eventually turn the rock that was in the pile to red, like a red form of a rock, which was slate. And that would be called red dog. They put that on all the roads. Of course, now it's illegal to do that because it had a lot of sulfur and mercury and other materials in it that was not good. So we learned from our past mistakes. Natural gas pros, burns cleaner than coal, and it's becoming much more available. Probably about 7, 8 years ago in Pittsburgh, we had a tour of a combined cycle gas-fired plant. Combined cycle plants are about 50% efficient. Sounds like it's an oxymoron, or it goes against the grain of having a maximum efficiency. But the combined cycle plants have a single pass turbine where they burn the gas just like a jet engine does. And it spins the turbine and it's geared down to turn the generator. And they get about 25% efficiency out of that. Then they take the heat coming out of the exhaust, because it's burned gas. They use that to boil water to create steam, which then turns a second turbine. So between the two systems, they get a combined efficiency of about 50% in the generation of electricity from the gas. So we're seeing a lot of that going in to use in the United States right now. We have fracking going on, and when we toured the power plant 6, 7 years ago, the combined cycle plant was shut down, nothing was running. I drive by there now, it's running 24/7 whenever I go by. Both the single pass turbines and the combined cycle plants are running because gas is so cheap. So combined cycle plants support base loads. The peaking are usually used for the single pass turbines, where they can turn them up, turn them on in about a minute, start taking load for the single pass turbines. Combined cycle plants take about 8 hours to come up to generate power. So they're much more planned. Natural gas, the bad side of natural gas does produce greenhouse gases there. Basically a methane, CH4 hydrocarbon, but it's better than burning coal as far as the environment is concerned. And this is a picture of National Grid's power plant down in Kent, UK. So yeah, the UK's natural gas, basically, from what I understand, it comes from Norway. It does come also in liquid form. This plant here, if you look, it has tanks for liquid LP gas, liquid propane, and that comes in super tankers, supposedly from Qatar. So from what I understand, I guess the UK has some issues, maybe shortfalls in the winter months of power. And they're actually they have cables under the sea to Ireland, cables under the sea to, I guess it would be France. And they export some power, but they import more power than they export right now. Nuclear, here's the thing I like talking about. Good things come in small packages. Burning 1 ounce of uranium has the same potential of 100 tons of coal. It's amazing. The reactor burns for 18 months whenever they refuel usually. They used to be on 1 month or 12 month cycles, and they moved to 18 months. And they have plants now operating 2 years, 24 months on one refueling. When they were on 12 months, they would refuel about a third of the core at a time. Take the outside rods, glue them inside, and put fresh fuel around the outside. On the 18-month plants, they take about half the core out and put new material in the other half. And then the 24 months, I think they take the whole core out and replace it with new fuel. But Einstein's equation is responsible here for things. You get a massive amount of energy from a very small reaction. Basically the E is equal to mc squared. The change in release of energy is due to the change in mass times the speed of light squared. Speed of light's pretty big. Price of electricity is determined largely by the capital cost of the plant and operating and maintenance costs. Fuel costs are small in comparison to what they are for a fossil fuel fired plant. Current nuclear facilities produce between 600 megawatts and 1,500 megawatts per reactor. Fairly large. The UK is building an EPR right now, which is 1,650 megawatts. France has 59 operating plants. The UK has about 15 or 16. US has over 100. And even now the Arab countries are building plants for putting 4 large reactors in the United Arab Emirates. So the UK has 15 fleet of retiring reactors called Magnox reactors, and then 1 new pressurized water reactor. But they're looking at new plants. Okay, the pros about nuclear, it's a plant that's running all the time, so it's used for base loading wherever possible. There's no release of greenhouse gases, and usually a tiny amount of fuel produces a lot of power. And one thing about the large plants, whether it be coal-fired or nuclear-fired, they don't load follow very easy because they have a lot of inertia in them. The nuclear plant has a problem in the sense that the reactor's either up and running or it's shut down. It's hard to control power on the reactor or have partial power. If you insert the control rods in the reactor part way, you would decrease the power. But what happens is you push all the flux down on the bottom, so all the nuclear reactions happening on the bottom half of the core. So if you're always inserting rods, which always go in from the top on pressurized water reactors or from the bottom on boilers, you burn up the core unevenly, which isn't good. So they would adjust that with a chemical shim by putting boron in the water to decrease the power, and they could pull the rods all the way out because the boron would decrease the power. But what happens there is whenever you want to increase the power again, you have to dilute all the water in the reactor core in order to get the neutrons up again to produce more reactions. And when you do that, you have a lot of cleanup because you essentially putting a lot of water into the reactor to dilute it. So that's hard to clean up. And you also have what's called xenon buildup. Xenon, after you shut the reactor down, starts ramping up. And xenon's a poison. So that when you partially shut down the reactor or lower the power, it lowers itself automatically. So you have the xenon fallout, you have a water dilution problem, and you have the uneven fluxing of the reactor core if you use it. So in general, the nuclear plants are operated full tilt, 100%, and that's when they're most efficient. Now the new plant designs do something different with partial rods, where they insert rods throughout the core at different lengths, it has a balancing effect on the flux. Okay, nuclear plant cons, the things that are against the nuclear plant is, of course, they're very expensive and slow to build. You can put a combined cycle gas plant in 6 months. Nuclear plants usually are more than 6 years to put in, so they're very slow in coming up. They're licensed and commissioned. It's very important to do things right in the nuclear industry, but that's one of the bad things there. The new plant design for the company I work for, Westinghouse Electric Company, is building the plant in modules. It's kind of like the shipbuilding industry where you put things together in advance, and when you want to build the plant, you send the pieces there and they assemble them. We're still trying to get to 6 years. We're probably about 8 years right now. Okay, renewable resources, solar, wind, and water. Generally doesn't use heat or steam to rotate the generators. Solar cells use the photovoltaic principle, generate electricity directly. Renewables, other than hydro, have limitations in the sense that the amount of energy they produce is not a very large amount in comparison to the large plants that we build, if they're fossil plants or nuclear plants. In the United States, we're building 2 nuclear plants in the state of South Carolina and two plants in the state of Georgia. They wanted to do a comparison up against wind energy, and I'm all for wind energy. But the calculations they came up with is they'd have to line the entire coast of South Carolina with windmills 3 deep in order to generate the same amount of power that came from the nuclear plants. And I don't know if that's a fair comparison or not. The fossil plants, the coal-fired plants, they don't take up a lot of area, but if you take a look at the amount of land they have to strip mine, or the amount of coal they have to extract out from underground, it's a sizable amount of area that's affected. So, solar cells, what's interesting about solar cells is the efficiencies. Right now, the best ones on the market are about 22%. But for the solar cell installations that you see on houses and whatnot, they're sitting at probably closer to 15% efficiency. And then the solar cells sitting on the roof of houses have to go through a process of inverting the DC currents to AC. So then you lose maybe another 10% or so through the inversion process. So it's kind of again, efficiency is the big thing there. They're getting better on the photovoltaic efficiencies, and prices are coming down. That's the best thing. What's interesting, I was on vacation last year down in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. I don't know if anybody ever goes to Florida here. There's always a lot of Brits down there in Florida whenever I'm there in the wintertime. But at any rate, if you look at the very top of the picture in the bottom, you see little vertical things. And those are vertical axes, wind turbines. They actually put them on the hotel down there. It's a minor amount of power. It's like, probably a fraction of a percent that the hotel needs. It's a step in the right direction. Kind of building something that looks unique into the infrastructure of the unit itself. Hydroelectric, that's the big plus for renewable energy. The Three Gorges Dam in China, I haven't seen that yet. I'd like to see it there. But it's going to put out, whenever it's completed, which I guess it is by now, 22,500 megawatt electricity. That's like 22 nuclear plants, huge nuclear plants. The Grand Colillo Dam in Washington State in the United States has 33 generators producing 6,800 megawatts, which is the largest in Pennsylvania, or largest in the United States. But China takes the prize at, again, close to 23,000 megawatts. Interesting thing, hydroelectric power started over 100 years ago. It's probably the first green technology. George Westinghouse, whenever he had the company and was first promoting AC, got the contract to build AC hydroelectric generating stations at Niagara Falls, near Niagara Falls in New York. That's a picture of it right now. It's built in 1896. Pretty amazing. something a lot of people don't know in the United States. Niagara Falls looks great during the day because they shut down some of the generating capacity at the plant site. At nighttime, when everyone goes to bed, they shut down the falls almost because they funnel the water over to the generating plants to generate electric. So, Three Gorges Dam, of course, the downside of Three Gorges Dam is it took a lot of people to be moved out of the path of the lake that was formed behind the dam. So a lot of people were displaced. Again, the pro is it's a renewable energy, potential energy. Water is turned into kinetic energy, and it's abundant in the sense that wherever it exists, it usually stays there. The dams in the United States, there's no problem filling them. The problem now is that the concern over the environment. There were the big dams that were built in the 20s and 30s in the United States. Then in the 60s and 70s, a lot of smaller dams were built. And they're actually going through now and evaluating and disassembling some of the dams, letting the rivers flow free because of the migration of the fish and so forth. But they're actually taking them out of service. Down there on the bottom left side of the picture, it shows the power station, pumping power station in the UK, which is rated at 1,800 megawatts. Basically, whenever there's excess power in the grid, they pump water up the dam, up into the reservoir behind the dam. Whenever they need power for peaking purposes or whatever, they take water out of the dam and run it through the steam engines that push it up and turn them into generators to let them generate power. What are the cons against hydro? Again, requires flooding a large area, releases greenhouse gases due to the rotting vegetation on below, disrupts the habitat of fish and wildlife, can be extremely expensive, and then limited availability. There's pictures that shows the river before it was dammed and after it was dammed there. But again, usually most countries will use what they have available. Nothing against it. Again, there's nothing that's perfect as far as the generation of electricity is concerned. But the more environmentally friendly you can make it, the better off we're going to be. Wind and solar pros, great. No release of greenhouse gases, no waste products from the operation, free and abundant fuel source. Interesting, I was down in Liverpool yesterday, and there were windmills right up against the tall buildings almost. I guess they're down on the waterfront in Liverpool, which I found very interesting because I haven't seen that in our country yet. The process behind the solar photovoltaic is, of course, the photons from the sun strike the semiconductor material and the solar collectors, and electrons freed up. The holes move one direction, electrons move the other, and you get a current. So what's interesting here is I know that the UK has solar collectors, but the country that has the most, solar photovoltaic is Germany, I believe. And I've always considered Germany a poly country. I gave a talk in Tunisia a couple of years ago, which is why I put Tunisia on this slide here. Pittsburgh doesn't get a lot of sun either. But here's something I found in the newspaper. Solar thermal plants down in Tunisia. It was in a British newspaper. They were proposing to building more solar collectors, more solar thermal plants in Tunisia, down around the Sahara Desert area, to generate thermoelectric power. They would put it into a cable that goes underneath the Mediterranean Sea, pops up in Sicily, connecting to the grid in Sicily, and then be spread across the EU. But the British were going to finance this, and it would be then considered their power, and they'd essentially get power probably from France from the nuclear plants, but they'd be credited the power that they're putting in from Tunisia. And the UK always likes sunny locations. We were on vacation one time when my daughter was in, she did a summer in Spain, and we were in Torremolinos, a sunny spot along the Mediterranean. And the UK residents, well not residents, the UK people just love listening to the radio to hear how bad the weather was back home. Take the light in, the 102 degrees we were in with low humidity. But at any rate, this was interesting. I don't know how much it's taken off. They've had some setbacks in Tunisia recently. But what was unique about the Talnor site was they were designing it so it had a lot of, I won't call it excess capacity, but normally solar plants only run during the day. But they were designing this plant to heat molten salt and store it in a reservoir and generate electricity 24/7 if they needed it or whenever they needed it, because it would have more salt than what's required just to run it during the day. So it was kind of like a storage bank, like batteries, something better than just having power come on during the day, which is what the main problem is with solar now. There's no places in a grid, very few places in a grid where you can store energy. Hydroelectric storage is probably the biggest. We're looking at doing batteries, we're looking at doing flywheels, we're looking at doing compressed air, all kinds of different ideas, but we need something to take away some of the variability of the renewable resources, or to compensate for them. The things against solar, of course, are concentrated solar power, large capital costs. Photo-Voltaics, they're coming down in price for sure. Before they were not financially viable, but now they are. But they're expensive to make. Requires a lot of land, a lot of significant property involved. If it's desert, probably nobody cares about that. And then there's limited geographic areas where it's really good. So the interesting thing is, we think of solar thermal maybe is not as good as solar photovoltaic. But again, photovoltaic is only running at 22% efficiency. Solar thermal, you can get closer to 40% efficiency, so it's better in that sense, even though you're still throwing away a lot of energy. A little comparison here against solar potential in the US and the UK. The charts were different. The UK chart was based upon the amount of kilowatts per square meter per year, which is the right side. US was based upon kilowatts per day available. And the highest in the US was sitting like at 9 kilowatt hours per day generated from meters squared. No, it has to be kilowatt hours because it's time. But at any rate, so the charts aren't the same. The highest point on the UK chart is equal to 3.56, which is right here in the US chart. So the best area right here is the worst area, which is Pittsburgh right here on the US chart. So the UK is wonderful for one resource, but maybe not so good for solar. But I understand that some people do have solar collectors on their house, or solar photovoltaic. But at any rate, for the US, you want to be on here. Tesla's building his $9 billion lithium-ion battery plant there. That's for building the cars. That's where all the Silicon Valley is. That's where the sun is. That's where all the fun is. Wind, this is a place where the UK shines. No, or not shines, turns maybe. The top 10 countries shown here right now. Of course, China's topping everything. They're building most of everything right now. But Germany's big in wind, China's big in wind, India and so forth. This is, again, I don't know if this list is based upon, I'm assuming it's installed capacity. The problem with wind, some people consider the blades kill wildlife, birds and bats. Some people are sensitive to the noise they generate. They say it has effects on the marine life, domestic animals, wildlife, so forth. Limited production. Usually the wind turbines, the last I was looking, were about 28% load factor. If they were rated at 2 megawatts, for instance, they would be generating about maybe 500 kilowatt of electric power, averaged over a long period of time. So there's a lot of wind farms out there, but they have the variability because the wind blows and it doesn't blow. About 4 or 5 years ago, I was on a ski vacation with my family out in Denver, Colorado. I have a son that lives out there. And we flew out late at night and got in late, and everybody went to bed. And I wanted to get up real early in the morning, 6 o'clock in the morning, to drive up to the ski slopes and get on the ski slopes. And everybody started throwing pillows at me when I tried getting them up. So I left the room, went downstairs to eat. They had a buffet, and I sat next to this gentleman that turned out to be a load dispatcher from Texas. And he said, "Yeah, those damn wind farms. They're up, they're down. I used to have a simple job. Now I got to follow them all the time. They're up, they're down. I have to throttle back, throttle open, throttle back, throttle open. The gas-fired plants to follow." So again, it's something with the variability you have to do. Either store the energy to take the variability on, or load follow with another source. And that's where we're working right now, trying to come up with something that stores energy on the grid. Wind potential in Europe, you can see there, it's pretty good for UK. We did a tour of the wind turbines outside of Pittsburgh. It was the summertime. They were just barely turning. They weren't generating any power. But in the wintertime, it's a good spot for wind farms. What's interesting is Pennsylvania. Everybody knows kind of where Pennsylvania's up at, not too far from New York. You know who owns all the wind farms in Pennsylvania? Florida Power and Light. Florida Power and Light had no green energy. They had fuel, fossil fuel, oil, gas, and coal-fired plants, and they have nuclear plants. They had no solar plants for anything like that. So the cheapest way for them to become, quote, a green company was to buy all the wind farms in Pennsylvania, wherever they could. So they would be called green, so people, could advertise them being green. I drive an electric car. It's a Nissan Leaf. And I used to say my car was nuclear powered because I could buy my power from the First Energy nuclear operating company. It has Beaver Valley nuclear plants and some operating plants, Davis Specie in the state of Ohio. So I was buying all my power nuclear. It was a very clean car. Then they quit selling nuclear, or they quit selling to individuals. They were only selling big blocks of power to industry and so forth. So now I have to say my car is powered by coal. My car got very dirty very quickly. So, at any rate, yeah, there's been comparisons that they said if you have a company that has coal-fired power plants, that you're probably about equal to what a Prius pollutes, because Prius is a hybrid car that kind of takes dynamic braking into account and so forth, so it's a little bit more efficient than a regular car. It's still better than regular cars. Okay, what's against wind and what's against solar? Probably the biggest thing is the intermittency. Again, it's produced only when it's windy or when it's sunny. And you have to have a large area to provide the generation capacity necessary for supplying large amounts of power. So no single source is the best, that's for sure. We have growing demand for energy. Fossil fuels emissions are increasing, becoming more critical environmentally. And then we have the alternate sources we're looking at that are emission-free energy, but we need to come up with ways to utilize them better. We have, excuse me a second. Let's shut this off. Sorry about that. So we have a need to come up with new technology, a way to use the storage capacity, or a way to come up with storage capacity to store the renewable energy if it's not being used. Last year we had the PES general meeting in Denver, Colorado, and one of the sponsoring utilities has 15% wind generation of their portfolio of all of the energy they generate. And of that 15%, they have to dump wind a lot because they cannot balance the system. They cannot close down the throttling. They cannot throttle the coal-fired plants they have quick enough to take account of the wind variabilities. So here's the perfect place for an application for energy storage. Sitting out there and they're dumping wind. And from what I understand, people told me this, they're familiar with the I guess the British grid, that there's wind being dumped in the UK a lot also, because they just can't predict the load. They can't control the load, but they can't predict the wind well enough to throttle up the plants. Benefits and challenges, again, just to recap: coal's widely available, cheapest as far as the construction costs. Emissions are bad. Oil, natural gas becoming natural gas is cleaner burning, but becoming more available. It's still emissions and concerns about groundwater with all the fracking. Nuclear fuel's cheap, stable. Long lead time though, nuclear waste still a concern. Proliferation also a concern. So, but what it comes down to is that we find that the countries have what they have and use what they have. Solar, plentiful fuel, emissions free, but not very efficient and costly to build. Limited if you have the area, you're good. If you have the sun, you're good. Water, you need the hydro. It's emissions free, but natural concerns about the environment. Wind, good fuel, but emissions free, but affects the variability affects the grid. So part of engineering, I guess, that I found is always the trade-off. What you do in one area, you sacrifice something else in another area. So you're always looking for a balance. Regarding emissions-free electricity, nuclear power, I think, is probably one of the largest. Hydroelectrics also there. Solar and wind equate to 2%, 3% in the United States right now. But what's interesting is that so much of it depends upon the area. I have a relative out in San Diego, California. I went out to visit him when we had the Power and Engineering Society meeting in San Diego, maybe 4 years ago or so. I was surprised. Everybody had solar collectors on their roof. There was solar thermal for the swimming pools, or solar photovoltaic, for their electricity. But what's happening is the utilities that provide power to those people started rebelling, in a sense. They had to buy the power back from the homeowners that had the solar cells on the roof, because that was a way to make them cost effective for a 20-year payback period. So utilities put up with that for a while. Then they decided they were going to have a surcharge to those houses, because the surcharge would be justified by saying you have a need for power only 2 hours a day to run your air conditioners after the sun goes down, where before you had a need for 10 hours per day to run your air conditioners. So we still have to have the reserve to cover your needs for those 2 hours, and we need to recover our investments for those reserves, so we can justify charging you $50 a month extra just for the capacity needed to prop up your air conditioning system after the sun goes down. So that was a good way for the recovery of the assets that the power company had. So then what happened next was then Tesla came up with the idea of selling, we'll just put battery storage in the house. We won't sell power back to the power company. We'll store it in the house and then reuse it out of the batteries. So that's been the latest turn of events. The electric cars haven't caught on very fast in the United States. Tesla's committed to building this $9 billion lithium-ion plant, battery plant, which is going to double the manufacturing capacity for those type of batteries in the world. So he's looking for other markets now. Okay, comparison, clean air power generation. This is something I always like to say, that if you needed to replace the nuclear power with wind power, you'd have to cover the state of Minnesota with windmills. But that wouldn't be a big loss because Minnesota is so cold in the wintertime, nobody wants to go there anyway. And West Virginia is that little notch here is where Pennsylvania sits up above it. Pittsburgh's usually right about here. Washington D.C. is over here, and New York's over here. But West Virginia is a coal mining state. We always used to have jokes about West Virginia. You know, West Virginia named the toothbrush. Anybody else would have called it a teeth brush. And they say the same thing down in Georgia. They make fun about Alabama. And Alabama says, well, thank God for Mississippi. Mississippi is the last point of the joke. At any rate, solar power would take covering the state of West Virginia with solar cells to equal what's generated by the nuclear plants. So again, summary there. There's always pros and cons with things. I think we have a mixture that is heading the right way. We're bringing in more renewables, trying to incorporate them into the grid. I think with the advent of the smart grid, where we can do a lot more control, have a lot more flexibility in what's out there as far as use is concerned, we may be able to load level things a little bit. There's even areas, I guess it's Denmark maybe, where they have electric cars that are connected into the grid. When you move your car to work, you plug it in to be charged. But you also tell the machine that if it needs power, you can discharge your battery for a while if there's a peak load, just so there's enough power for you to get home at night. And then you get compensated for that capability the power company has. So things like that hasn't caught on in the United States yet. That makes sense. Okay, so the question is, what's this globe going to look like in 50 years? Will everything look like London, or will everything look like the desert area? So, okay, that's the end of my first part of the presentation. This is probably a good time to take a break and answer questions on this part.
You guys got any questions?
I apologize if this is very elementary for you.
Sorry, just one question here.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for your presentation. I'd just like to find out what do you, in your estimation, is the game changer going forward in terms of making things more sustainable? In terms of generation, is it storage? Is it generation technology?
Well, I think the things are going to come hand in hand, but the big game changer is going to be a worldwide event of some catastrophic, drought or something like that, where it's going to be forcing things, where people will start taking it seriously. In the United States, there's still a lot of politicians that don't believe global warming has been caused by man. The countries that are most affected are the ones that can least afford it. For me, global warming is good. I'll have to shovel less snow in the wintertime. I'll have a lower heating bill. Maybe my air conditioning bill will be higher. But countries like Bangladesh that are at sea level will be flooded. The African countries maybe that have minimal rain now, the climate change will cause mass failure of crops, so forth. That's probably going to be the game changer. The technology, I've been hoping for cold fusion. I haven't seen anything out of that in a long time. Fusion itself is so far off. When I was in 8th grade, I remember I was a very avid reader for Popular Science magazine. I thought it was the greatest thing. And they were predicting by the turn of the century, last turn of the century I should say, that we would have fusion reactors all over the place. I mean, we're still not close. We spend billions of dollars on a national emission facility in the U.S. We're building the ITER, I guess, in France, which is a wonderful thing to do. 11 nationalities coming together to build a fusion reactor. I mean, we have trouble just, getting things right within our own country with the guy next cube over, let alone put 11 countries together building the most complicated thing on earth, fusion reactor. It's a good start. But it's going to be, I think, slow process improvements. It's going to be, what works good here is great, but it doesn't work over there, so you're going to see different technologies. But I'm hoping that the next generation coming through school works in these areas, to improve the efficiencies, to improve the technology so everyone can use them. But it's right now it's people that use what they have basically. We're still using coal in the United States. Gas is becoming more abundant. You'll see this in the next presentation. Price of gas dropped from over $12 for a million BTU to under $2 a million BTU. That's like a six-fold decrease in price. So, what looked attractive 5 years ago is different now. If they find fracking causes earthquakes, now the next thing, they may shut those down. So, as fast as it came, it may disappear. But everything is economically driven yet, and that's probably part of the problem. Economics is based upon the amount of energy you use. The more you use, the better off you are, it seems. So that's probably one of the things that, slowly has to change.
Just to add on that, I think there are things that are already happening. For example, in India, just a couple of weeks ago, about a month ago, there was a coal-powered thermal power plant which ran out of water supply for the first time in 60 years since it was set up. So things are already happening. The situation of drought is very severe already in India. So that will push the energy developers to think in new ways of creating sustainable. So things are already happening. Just to complement what you were saying.
Well, they have Southern California had a large drought for a long time. And they were talking about building a canal from the Great Lakes, Lake Superior, across the country to get water to Southern California.
What's funny is most of these coal-powered thermal plants are built close to the river, especially with fast access to fresh water.
Yeah.
And this was built at the shore of Ganges, which is the largest river in India, and it ran out of water.
Yeah.
60 years.
Wow.
So these things are happening as we speak.
Yeah. What's interesting is talking about, building things along rivers. A few years ago, three years ago or so, my wife and I took a river cruise. We went from Basel, Switzerland, up the river to, I guess, Amsterdam. And I just had a brain dump. What river is that?
The Rhine.
The Rhine, right. You went up the Rhine. And we're sitting up on the roof deck of the boat, going through all these, industrial areas and areas where they got castles all over them, great harbors up on a hill. We're passing a big coal-fired plant. You can see it's got huge cooling towers, which all thermal plants do, where they have forced air, which is hiding the power plant. But then anyway, all these big thermal parabolic cooling towers outside. And you can see the conveyor belts, all the coal piles in the background and whatnot. The people next to me, sitting in the next row over, are saying, "Boy, look at that big nuclear plant." That's from 3 Mile Island, was always shown with, the cooling tower. And then more recently, The Simpsons, the cartoon program on TV, shows them with the big parabolic towers. So. Then, things are changing. And like I said, I'm looking for the next generation to come along and, help the technology, or build the technology that we're going to move through a sustainable system. Yes?
I'm just wondering, what do you think is the most significant factor that limits the use of renewable energy?
That limits what? That limits what?
Limits renewable energy.
Right now it's cost. Everything is economic. The only way that it's been it has to be promoted, I guess, is what I think. I tried setting up a tour of a windmill blade manufacturing facility 2 hours outside of Pittsburgh. It was running 24/7, 3 shifts a day. I finally got a commitment for the section to buy, or to rent a minivan to take, or not a minivan, like a 12-person van to take up to the area so we could all go up together. I called the plant up, they were shut down. I said, what do you mean you shut down? You were operating 24/7 the last we talked. He said, yeah, that was before the end of the year. The stipend that the government was giving, the tax incentives that the government had on it, dried up, so they quit building them. So my car, the Leaf, Nissan Leaf, it's a $33,000 car. Nobody had Nissan Leafs anywhere around it. I went to buy it, I didn't like the price, so I leased it for 2 years. In the beginning of the lease, the car was worth $33,000. The government gave an incentive of $8,500. So it brought the price down to around $26,000. I leased it for 2 years, and I was going to turn it back in. And Nissan came up with a program where they were going to give me $6,500 off the price of the car if I bought it. So I ended up paying a little over, it was about $9,000 when it was said and done, to buy a car that was 2 years old that had 20,000 miles on it. Tremendous benefit for me. But I never would have bought it without the two government, without Nissan giving the benefit, the rebate, and then the government giving the rebate. And right now, all the homeowners that have solar cells on their roof are depending upon, the power company being coerced into buying back the power that they generate. Again, it's an ongoing fight. They put a tariff on people, and people are trying to do something different. But it's economics drives everything, and where there are no choices, like in Africa, where there's a lot of villages and towns that will never become powered. The use of solar cells, is a wonderful thing for them. And as the price comes down, it's like anything else. The more you make, the cheaper it's going to get. Then when the economics make sense, everyone will be doing it. But somehow the government has to say, we're going to put a carbon tax on, so you quit burning coal, you quit burning gas, and you find something else. Or there's carbon trading, with credits given. But something has to be done to move off of what we are. There's billions of tons of coal to mine yet. There's billions of places where billions of cubic feet of natural gas exist under the ground. And the more fracking they do, the more liberated gas. But there has to be a push to move people away from that, because if not, everybody follows the economic role. The cheapest thing is the best thing to do, or what makes sense, economic sense. My viewpoint only. Yes.
How long do you think smart cities will be developed around the world, and what are the biggest obstacles for them to be practiced?
The what? I missed the first part of the
Smart
question.
city. Smart city.
Smart grids?
Yeah, smart grids.
Oh, okay. Well, the technology is advancing, and what needs to happen now is the interfaces be worked out. There's so many domains within the smart grid. There's the buyers, the sellers. There's the hardware. There's the communications between everybody. In other words, the smart grid, the idea there is, you could buy the power when you want, for the choice, to power your home or your car or whatever. But you have to have communications. So before you just plug your car in to the wall, it gets charged. You pay for it. But now you may want to say, well, I'm only going to buy wind power when it's available. So you have to have communication with the wind generator. So there's a lot of interconnections that have to occur. A lot of software has to be written. A lot of hardware has to be developed. time of day metering right now is just, you know, just starting out in our country in the United States. But it makes sense for a lot of people. You know, you don't want to run your clothes dryer, if it's much a clothes dryer, during the middle of the day whenever it's hot, because the peak load is going to cost more to produce the power. So there's a lot of communications, a lot of software, a lot of hardware that needs to be worked on. But it's, you know, they're starting down the road. Department of Energy in the United States has put together as like an $11 billion program, a $14 billion program to generate some of the hardware, some of the software needed to do some of these functions. And it's been in place for a while, and they're gathering data, collecting results. So it's, you know, as they upgrade the you know, the infrastructure, they're putting more of these things in place. Some countries, I forget where it is, someplace in South America I think has the most advanced grid. And I couldn't believe it. It was last PSGM I was at, you know, they were talking about it. I forget where it is, but it's a small country. The government just decided to go out and, you know, not instigate, but have everybody put in smart meters and, you know, have the ability to dial in whenever they wanted to change their power requirements or change their load demand or whatever. So, but I'll have to do some research on that.